Absolutely. Lord, you gotta play him.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I guess today I was just thinking as we were singing, just looking around and seeing the odd new face here this morning. And I always wonder if there's an expectation when we show up to a church or to a place. And I always wonder, sometimes you see people and then you might never see them again. Sometimes you see them and then you'll see them every time after that. And I always wonder what we as people search for. And then I just wrote, for me personally, I try to place very few expectations on groups of people. And I don't know why that is, if it's from a perspective of I don't want to be disappointed, or I don't want to set the bar too high, or what it is. But then I just wrote this morning quickly as I was sitting here, I'm like, oh, I do have an expectation of especially this place. And my expectation is one word, and it's family. And I thought, man, we can do a lot in life, but we need relationships, and we need them relationships to have meaning, and I call that family. So as I was writing last night, again, we are part of a Bible study that's every couple of weeks, and so somebody always has the devotion or whatever, and we had went for a while, and then I said, you can probably take me off the devotion list. And somebody said, why is that? And I'm like, because I get all sorts of time to share my words. So I coach a couple of basketball teams. I get to come here, and by the time all of that happens, I have used a lot of my words. And as we were sharing this morning, I was reminded, because that part of this I just wrote last night on the top of my paper. I said, does anyone have a word they would like to share? Something that has been on your heart this week. And sometimes people don't get that opportunity, right? So as we're sharing and as we're sitting here and people are just kind of saying what's going on in their lives, and they're just looking to have that family connection. And I always want, especially in this building, and I felt that it's been very much that way, I always look to Bruce for forms of leadership. But as far as actually like speaking and sharing and be a part of what we call church, I find that it can be a pretty open environment. And so I never want people to feel like it's just one person up here doing a monologue. It's like, no, it's very much a dialogue. So if somebody does have a minute or two of something they ever just want to stand up and share, or come up front and share, always let me know, or feel welcome that that's a possibility here. So, does anyone? Okay, if you do, then
You're doing just fine.
doing
brother.
just fine. No, but it's always an open thing. Just remember that. So
Well, that's good to know.
Hey Chris, I imagine by now you've known that if we have anything to say, we'll say.
you'll just shout it out, right? Yeah. I very much appreciate that. So I have one of my good young friends here this morning, Gage, and I always think that with this church, if you got something to say, shout it out. It's not, I said that to Gage this morning, you don't have to dress up fancy to come here. It's all about family. So it's been a whirlwind couple of weeks. Basketball is full steam and winding the corner for the home stretch. And so as you guys were talking about preaching over the next week or two, or what's going on, it just seems as life has been very full. This last week, the senior team was in Westlock, and the juniors were in Fairview. So because we coach both teams, and whenever we play on the same weekends, then Jordan heads with the senior team and I stay with the junior team. And I always wish that I could be both places at once. I have a big heart for both of these teams, and it can take a lot from a coach to keep all the boys in it and giving all they can. And then I just wrote beside that the battlefield of life, and the court. I was telling the boys this last week before they headed out, I said my expectation of the game is to build relationships that ring out far past whatever the basketball court can give us. And as I walked in this morning, that's my same expectation of church. It's not show up here for an hour and oh, that was nice, and whatever that expectation that I labeled as family, it rings out far more than this building right here can give us, right? So I was thinking, as I coach, is it the same sometimes for God? How many times does he have to coach me back? So that's the one thing that I feel is a responsibility as a coach, is we're looking for blind spots in the team, and we're trying to cover off areas where there's improvement. And then last night it kind of struck me as it's been a bit of a long haul over the last couple of weeks, just even for me mentally. So it's one thing to, come on boys, come on, you're doing it and you're pouring into it. And then all of a sudden last night it sort of just hit me. And I was like, Kate, I need somebody to come along once in a while with me and even be willing to put their arm around me. And lots of people are like, oh, you don't need that. You're the one that's always ripping the floor apart and yelling the boys. And I'm like, no, don't be mistaken. We each need that in our lives. I don't care who you are, what position you have. So anyhow, I was just feeling that burden last night. And I have felt many times that God needs to coach me back because I get sidetracked, I get burdened, and it can just take me down some wrong roads. So anyhow, 2 weeks ago, we were in Ridge Valley with the juniors, and it was a Ridge Valley Byzantium tournament. And Ange Rossworm's mom was up, and her name is Kathy. I don't know if anybody knows Kathy. So anyhow, whenever Kathy's up, she's from a seminary in Cochrane. And so we walked into the gym, me and Melissa, and sat down beside Kathy. And I had a bunch of stuff on my mind. I was reading all these articles, and I had all these questions. And like I said, hi, and then pretty much just went, woo! All this stuff, and I had all these questions, and I think I wrote in here somewhere why I appreciate her, because I have many mentors in my life that are in this geographic area, but when you get to talk to somebody that's outside of your geographic area, sometimes you get a fresh perspective because they have a different circle of influence. So anyhow, I'm rattling all this stuff off, and then I think at some point I looked at Melissa because she was trying to watch her granddaughter play basketball, and I'm like, I should probably move, because all I'm doing is just sitting here talking about all this stuff, and actually, to tell you the truth, at the end of it, I forget almost all the questions that I was asking her, but I distinctly remember her response. So her response was, I don't even remember what all the questions were, but I do distinctly remember her reply. I hope you are in the Word as much as you are in the articles. And I thought, what a great remark to maintain my focus. So this week again, and last week has been a pretty busy time for me. And then I come home last night, and I had a few ideas wrote down, but just nothing seemed like it was kind of coming together. And we had left off last week in John 9:35-41, where Jesus healed the blind man. And we talked about physical blindness and spiritual blindness. And as I was kind of stumbling along and I had all these thoughts in my mind, I thought, you know what, sometimes we just need to read the Word. We don't need to get over fancy. We don't need to, and then I thought again, what is the expectation? And I was like, you know what, sometimes we say, keep it simple, but it's not. It's just keeping it where it needs to be. So I'd handed out some papers, and whoever has John 10:1-10. Stephen, if you would come up. Oh, come up. No, come up, Stephen. Come up. Oh, God. Please.
Don't be so shy.
Okay, nope, okay, I won't pressure anymore. You do it right from there. Belt her out.
Most assuredly, I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same as if a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Yet they will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they do not know the voice of strangers. Jesus used this illustration, but they did not understand the things which he spoke to them. Then Jesus said to them again, most assuredly I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. I have come that they may have life, and that they may have it more abundantly.
Amen. Okay.
Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen. Kirsten, you're on deck. I just want you to pay attention. I'm not sure what version you're in, but in mine, it's an NLT. And 5 words in on verse 1. What is one of the key words that it says?
You give us a scripture.
I tell you the
Truth.
okay, verse 7 that he read. So he explained it to them. I tell you the. Okay, Kirsten, you can come up and read 10, 11 to 21. Yeah, chapter 10, 11 to 21.
11.
Yeah.
I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, since he is not the shepherd and doesn't own the sheep, leaves them and runs away when he sees a wolf coming. The wolf then snatches and scatters them. This happens because he is a hired hand and does not care about the sheep. I am a good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as my Father knows me, and I know the Father, I lay my life down for the sheep. But I have other sheep that are not from this sheep pen. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. Then there will be one flock, one shepherd. This is why the Father loves me, because I lay my life down, so that I may take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay down on my own, and I have the right to lay down. And I have the right to take it up again, and I have received this command from my Father. Again, the Jews were divided because of these words. Many of them were saying, "He has a demon and he is crazy. Why do you listen to him?" Others were saying, "These aren't the words of someone who is demon possessed. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind?"
Thank you. Okay, so if you never grew up in church, back to the expectations, or maybe currently it's not a belief that you carry, it's about, is this true or not? And if it's not true for you, what is true? Like, do we seek truth in any form or fashion in our lives? Right? So basically, I said, remember, and I've said this before here, what do you do to cover up a lie?
Tell another lie.
Jump tripper.
Yeah? I wrote you bury it. Right? If you tell a lie, what do you do to cover it up? You bury it.
Yeah. With another
And
lie.
and I said, what do you do to cover up truth?
You don't.
Which is kind of true, but I wrote something different. And I think about this very often in the world we live in. Remember what you do to cover up a lie. You bury it. What do you do to cover up truth? You drown it with... Go ahead, Kenzie.
You make another truth.
You make another truth? No, I wrote you drowned it with so much pleasure and noise and distractions, you won't even care about truth. Right? So when you're thinking and you're like, well, I might not believe the same way as you do. I might not think the same way as you do. And I'm like, perfectly fine. We don't need to get into that right now. But the main thing is, do you even seek truth in the world we live in? And if you do, would you at least recognize with our phones, with our social media, with all of the things going on around us, would you even say that it's easy to find truth?
No.
Right? And if the answer is no to that, the thing that makes me most upset in the world that we live in is that you can't, there's so much coming at us. So much coming at us that if you believe in something, you're going to run and get the 10 articles that support your theory. The person that opposes you is going to run and get his 10 articles off the internet that he believes. And then we're like, oh, we're just going to agree to disagree.
We're the
You're-
most informed generation without actual knowledge.
Right?
Wisdom.
Yeah.
Wisdom.
Right.
There's so
And what's it
much
called? I'll just
information,
Google it all. I'll just Google it all, and that's going to be my highest authority in my life. All the while, if we take an honest assessment, not currently of what we believe in this life, just of the honest assessment, can you tell what's truth anymore? Can you turn on the TV and trust anything? Can you turn on your phone and
No,
trust anything?
not.
It's a barrage of noise. So every time I come here, and because I have a young friend here that we do quite a bit of life together on the basketball court, grew up a couple of miles down the road from me, and I'm like, it's pretty cool to be in communities where we can look at one another and be like, do we have a straight and narrow on truth? Could we line up and go to the same source for the same truth? And it can be a pretty difficult thing to do. So what is the premise of the verses that we read? What is the truth which it refers? And I want you to turn to John 14:6. So Bruce, what was the premise of those verses that we read in a nutshell?
The truth of God, I guess.
Yeah?
Um,
And he is the shepherd, right?
yeah. he was
Willing
our-
to lay down his life.
lay down his life for us, yeah.
And you said it this morning. What did you say this morning when you were standing up here? We need to decide that we're going to
Yeah,
accept.
we have to decide, it's our choice, yeah.
It's our choice, right? So when I read them verses and I said, what sums up those verses? And I turned to John 14:6, and this is a very common verse to all of us. It says, Jesus told him, I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? No one can come to the Father except through me. Jesus says he is the only way to God the Father. Some people may argue that this is way too narrow. In reality, it is wide enough for the whole world. If the world chooses to accept it, instead of worrying about how limited it sounds to have only one way, we should be saying, thank you, God, for providing a sure way to get to you.
Amen.
All the while, there's one thing that this hinges on. Long before your free choice even gets activated. Right? Well, it's kind of the same, but you have to decide whether it's true. Otherwise, we've said that before. Remember that one sermon I said, if it's not truth, will you pursue it? If you don't think that it's true, we'll never embark even on the journey to go down the road.
Why would you?
And then you stop and you think, well, what is actually stealing this away from me? What is it that says that it's not true? What in the world, right, is drawing me away or distracting me from even caring about it? Do we just go through life and we live and we die and that is the end of it? So back to the John chapter 10, verse 19. What does it say in there? John 10, verse 19. When he had said these things, the people were again divided in their opinions about him. And I just put divided and circled that. How many things over the last couple of years have we seen people divided?
Oh my.
Oh my, right? If you could sum it up, that's a good way to sum it up. Oh my. Just say oh my, right? Spiritual things, government things, you name it, right? And we see it in our communities, even in our families. Every level of life has been impacted over the last several years. And to actually decide what is true and what is not, oh my goodness, we need to make sure that we are pretty honed in. So just an aside here, if you truly cared about truth and lived 2,000 years ago, and this was firsthand information, right? Because last time I was here, we come off of the blind man seeing. And I said that before. If you seen that nowadays, what would you think?
Wow.
Or crazy, right? If I heard somebody say that, they'd be like, are you crazy? Is this even true, right? That's a fair, right? I keep looking to gauge a little bit because I'm like, right, you hear this stuff and you're like, is that actually true? And I'm like, if we lived 2,000 years ago and it was a first-hand account, like your neighbor down the street that you knew was blind for 20 years and he could all of a sudden see, you'd be like, oh my goodness, this is true. It wouldn't be refuted, nothing. So I wrote here, if you truly cared about truth and you lived 2,000 years ago and this was first-hand information, this is long before CNN and Fox News could have got their mitts on it and muddle it all up. Would you not accept it as true? Guess what the next question is? We go 2,000 years ago, we read the history books that they're currently trying to rewrite, and I'm like, why do we still have trouble accepting truth as truth? And then it's back to the, yeah, we're smarter than that. And then you can take an honest assessment and you can be like, because truth got buried in a sea of irrelevance.
Sometimes people are scared of the truth.
Right.
Now, this is the truth too, and then all roads lead to heaven. Buddha,
Right.
all these other ones, you worship them guys, and they all lead you to heaven.
And so then after you go down that road and you embark on it and you get in some actual good conversations about it, there'll be a lot of people that'll come out of that and they'll be like, I can't even handle the debate. So when you can't handle the debate, what happens? Don't care. It just becomes in another pile.
That doesn't agree with my truth.
Yeah, or it doesn't agree with your truth, right? So who cares about truth anymore? We'll just push it to the side. And then it becomes buried. And then we're like, well, we'll just live our 0 to 80 years, plus or minus, and we'll clip along and nobody will care about truth. And I'm like, that is so sad. It's so sad. The one thing that we should be fighting for in our world is always truth, and we just allow it to get pushed to the side. Okay, God's master plan. The 2 symbolic trees in the Garden of Eden are highly significant to us today. These trees explain the very foundation of this world, which has always been a mystery to mankind. People can laugh and scoff at the 2 trees as a childish way to explain the Bible. And that's another thing, because our culture says, well, I don't believe in it, so I'll either just laugh and scoff at it so that I can push it out of my mind, and I'll go on caring about what is number one pleasure in my life, whatever that thing is. If it's money, cars, houses, you name it, right? People can laugh and scoff at the 2 trees as a childish way to explain the Bible, but this is so profound that almost no one understands it. It is the very depth of God. What happened to Adam and Eve is now happening to the whole world. God has allowed mankind to work out things their own way. He has observed humans continually chose the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is really the tree of death. It symbolizes eternal death for us. If we don't learn from some lessons, this is something to beware of in this pulsating, evil, twisted world. And then again, there was some conversations going on in the vehicle just on the way here, the commercials that we get inundated with, right? The things that are put into our face to accept as the new truth. And if they're pushed so much, you can see how the world will start to choose them as the new right. I said, in a world that chooses right or wrong as right and discards right as wrong, there's nothing good that's going to come from that. Nothing good.
It's like all the lies that the government send out is all propaganda.
Right, and
It's
we
all
just start,
lies.
after you get inundated with them enough, it can become the people's new right.
People believe it.
We are nearing the end of 6,000 years of human history. It is as if the movie were almost over. We can't understand what is going on unless we go back to the beginning and understand the premise and what has happened since. We must go back to the 2 trees and beyond to grasp why the world is the way it is. Study the origins. Start the movie from the beginning. From our very first parents very first parents, human beings have been learning the hard way, and going our own way brings suffering and death. The firstborn son of the first humans murdered his own brother in Genesis 4:8. Cain killed Abel. At the very beginning, we have suffered strife, violence, and murder. We have failed to understand our purpose or potential from the beginning. The first family on earth was taught directly from God. He didn't hide his face from them. He taught them how to live a joyful, happy, abundant, prosperous life. They could have grown in godly character to the point that they would be born into God's family, but they rejected him, and their descendants killed each other, including the prophets God sent through the ages to warn them and to teach them. Human beings are in love with Satan's attitude. They kept trusting in themselves, no matter how horrible the results are from this fundamentally wrong choice. Pay attention to this. They are self-reliant and self-willed. How many of us can fall into those categories? And as soon as we are self-reliant and self-willed, we will go down the road of it doesn't matter what truth is, as long as we come out on top. Right? And again, you can be sitting here today and you can be like, I don't know if I agree with any of this, but when you read that, there's probably a little alarm bell that goes off in your mind and you're like, that sounds true. I don't have to believe anything else he says, except that the world has shown us that we are self-reliant and self-willed. And as soon as I have that feeling, I don't really care about anyone or anything else. Right? Okay, so we need to be aware of that. Okay, I'm just going to wrap it up with this last thing, and it was again just from John 14:6. Jesus is the truth and the life. It's easy to say. It's hard for a lot of us as we go through life. Even if you were growing up in the church or if you were unchurched, to come to a point one day in your life, especially if the world has dogpiled you for many years and threw a barrage of information at you, to accept that as truth. And we must be aware that we can actually in our minds say something is true and do nothing with it. So that is a footnote to that. It'd be like one person says, yeah, it's true, I know it's true, but I'm going to keep living over here. So what we want to be aware of is when we say something is true, that we move closer to that. And again, just because my young friend is here today, I was excited because I spend enough time with him that I was like, you know what? He gets to see me here, and he gets to see me all throughout the week. And he gets to decide if what I say here matches up to the way that I represent my life through the week. And if it doesn't, what does that say about me? It says that I can say it's true, but my life is far from it. And that should be our goal. And I'm always reminded with Melissa, because she says, you place high expectations on people. And I do, and I try, even through my own shortcomings and stumblings, to make sure that people have the right and the privilege to place high expectations on me. I want to accept that. I said that before, remember in school? Actually, it started with my mom, and she said, I think it started with my mom, I don't want to get it wrong, but I'm sure at some point in her life, she said, you need to be good because you're representing, or somebody is watching you. You need to be a good role model. And I'd be like, I didn't ask for this job. I don't want anything about being a role model. You go to school, and the teacher says what? Be good. You're a role model for the kids that are younger. And I would look at them and I'd be like, I didn't ask for that. Not one iota of me asked for that. I don't accept it. Then all of a sudden, I had kids. And I was like, I will gladly take that responsibility. That is all I want. And now when I'm with other kids, young adults, young men on that basketball court, that's all that I want. Is for them to see, you know what? I might not agree with him, but his life and what he says, they match up as close as I can expect from them. And we should have that as a goal in our life. On Friday night, when you're out partying, it's like, is this what I stand for? If you're out in the cow pen and you're cursing and you're swearing, you're at work and you're around your buddies, you're looking at stuff that you shouldn't be looking at, and you're like, is this how close that I want to be? Right? And we need to take encouragement out of that. So my last line here is, are we so self-reliant and self-willed to see the truth? Are we distracted and too indifferent to even care? And so if that is you and there's something in your mind that's like, yep, that rings out as truth, then I would just encourage you. The first steps are to try and draw closer to the truth. And I do believe that very much. We can read a lot of articles. The internet is our playground. And I'm like, this book has been around for a very, very long time. And I would start here. Somebody started it, and they started in Genesis, and I said, oh, be careful. You're heading for Leviticus right out of the gate. And Leviticus could be a tough read. And I said, this isn't a normal book. I said, if I were you, and it's just me, but I said, I would start halfway through the book. I would start either that or in the Gospels. And then I said, then I would move out from there. Because I do know people that have flipped it over and they're like, oh, it's a book. I'll start at the beginning. And they get into Leviticus and they're like, I don't understand it, right? But it is true, right? Everything in here is true. So, Bruce, if you'd like to close us out. That's right.
I got an announcement.
Let's close in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you again for being here with us. we thank you for the message that Chris has brought, and just pray that we can take it into our hearts, into our lives, and live it throughout the week, and that others would come to know you because of who we are as we represent you. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.